All right, diving into Leviticus chapter 7 today.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about, sacrifices and offerings in the Old Testament. You sent over this really interesting commentary from my Christian space.
Yeah.
And it breaks down the whole chapter verse by verse.
Yeah.
So we're going to unpack some of those ancient rituals and all the details.
Right.
Maybe we can even see how they connect to, values that we might hold today.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that chapter 7 kind of builds on what we've already seen in some of the earlier chapters. Like, it's not just a list of offerings.
Right.
It kind of gives us this deeper understanding.
Oh, so it's like we're getting like the, the director's cut with like the deleted scenes and bonus features.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Before we get lost in the details, though, can you give us a quick overview of what Chapter 7 is really all about?
Sure. This chapter mostly focuses on the instructions.
Yeah.
For 4 main offerings, we have the guilt offering, the burnt offering, the grain offering, and the peace offering.
Okay.
Each one had its own purpose and specific procedures that the Israelites followed very carefully.
Right. So let's start with that guilt offering.
Okay.
Leviticus 7.1 to 7 calls it especially holy. And they say that phrase twice.
Yeah, it seems like reconciliation was a huge deal.
It's a deal, yeah.
The tabernacle, that was like their central place of worship.
Right.
It was all about facilitating reconciliation, between people and between God and whoever committed the offense.
Right.
The guilt offering was like this tangible way to repair.
So not just saying sorry, but actually taking action.
Exactly. And just like the sin offering, it involved a fire offering where a portion was given to the priests.
Okay.
And speaking of priests, Leviticus 7.8:10 gets into how they were compensated.
Okay, now this is what?
Their wages, if you will.
Yeah. Now this is where it gets interesting for me.
Yeah.
I mean, how did they even figure out, fair pay for priests back then?
Well,
were they on salary? Or?
Well, they weren't getting tips or anything like that. Right. But it was definitely this idea of fair compensation for their service to God, right?
Right.
The priests, they dedicated their entire lives to these rituals. So they received portions of the offerings.
Okay.
So, for example, they got the hide from the burnt offering and parts of the baked grain offerings.
Okay, so they got a piece of the action. But hold on, it also mentions that, unbaked grain offerings were shared equally among all the priests.
Yeah.
Why is there that distinction?
That's a great question. It kind of suggests that the type of work that they were doing affected how much they got.
Right.
So, the priests who were doing those more labor-intensive tasks, like preparing the baked offerings, they'd get a larger share.
Okay, that makes sense. It's so interesting to see, those economic structures, even within their religious practices.
Exactly.
Okay. Let's move on to the Thanksgiving peace offerings.
Yeah.
In Leviticus 7.1115, what can you tell us about that one?
So the peace offering was kind of unique.
Okay.
Because it included expressions of gratitude to God. And it had these specific requirements, including 3 different kinds of bread.
Okay.
Unleavened cakes mixed with oil, unleavened wafers spread with oil, and cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, but leavened.
Oh, leavened bread.
Yeah.
Now, that's interesting because usually leavened bread wasn't allowed in offerings.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
But in this case, the leavened bread was included.
Okay.
But it wasn't burned on the altar.
Right.
Instead, it was given to the priest with the meat.
Okay.
And another thing, none of the meat from this offering could be left until the next morning.
Wow, those are some pretty specific instructions.
Very specific.
I'm starting to understand why these rituals were so important to the Israelites. Yeah. Every detail had meaning.
It did.
But what about offerings that were more spontaneous?
Okay.
Those made for a vow or as a voluntary donation.
Okay.
Were those treated differently?
Yes, they were. Leviticus 7.1618 explains that the meat from these offerings could be eaten on the second day. Okay. But if any was left on the third day, it had to be completely burned.
Oh, wow.
And there were consequences for eating it on the third day.
Consequences? What kind of consequences?
The text says that the offering would be nullified, and the person who ate it would face consequences.
Oh, wow.
It shows how important it was to follow all the instructions exactly.
So there was a right way and a wrong way to approach the divine.
Absolutely.
Even in their expressions of gratitude or personal vows.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered guilt offerings, burnt offerings, grain offerings, and peace offerings.
Right.
What else is important to know about these sacrifices before we move on?
Well, the next section of Leviticus 7 talks all about the significance of purity in these rituals.
Purity, huh?
Yeah.
Sounds like a deep dive all on its own.
It is a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just about physical cleanliness, though.
Oh, okay.
It's also about approaching God with a clean heart and body.
Oh, so it's more like we would think of like integrity today.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay.
Doing things the right way for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Leviticus 7.1921 is very clear.
Okay.
If any of that peace offering meat touched anything unclean, it became unclean and couldn't be eaten.
It makes you wonder, what did unclean even mean to them?
Right.
Like, was it just like accidentally brushing against a stray dog?
Right.
Or was it like something deeper?
Their idea of uncleanliness included both like physical impurities and ritual ones.
Okay.
So it could be caused by things like skin diseases, bodily discharges, contact with dead bodies.
Oh, wow.
Or even certain foods. These things were believed to create a state of separation from God.
It's so different from how we think about things today.
Right.
But I guess the underlying principle is still relevant.
Yeah.
Commentary even points that out, right?
It does.
That even though we don't have these same rituals, the idea of striving for purity in our actions, our thoughts, our intentions, it still resonates with us.
It raises questions about what purity means in our own lives.
Okay, so maintaining this ritual purity was crucial.
Yeah.
But what else was off limits when it came to these offerings?
Okay.
Were there like specific things they couldn't eat?
Yes, there were. Leviticus 7.2227 specifically forbids eating fat from animals that are suitable for burnt offerings and any blood.
Oh, okay.
Those were seen as holy and reserved for God alone.
There's got to be some symbolism behind that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, why fat and blood specifically?
Fat was considered the richest, best part of the animal.
Okay.
It represented abundance.
Yeah.
And the essence of its vitality.
Mm-hmm.
Blood, on the other hand, symbolized life itself.
Oh.
So offering these to God acknowledged his sovereignty.
Okay.
And showed that he was worthy of the best parts.
So it was more than just like a dietary rule. It was a way of showing respect and devotion?
Exactly.
What happened if somebody broke this rule? Were there consequences?
Yes, absolutely. The text says that anyone who ate the forbidden fat or blood would be cut off from their people.
Oh, wow.
So essentially, they would be shunned by the community.
Wow.
This really shows how crucial these rituals were for maintaining social order and religious adherence.
It's incredible how these practices were woven into every aspect of their lives.
It's a lot to keep track of.
I know. We've got rules about the types of offerings, how to prepare them, who can eat, what the importance of purity.
But for the Israelites, these instructions weren't a burden.
Okay.
They were a way to honor God, maintain that right relationship with him, and ensure the well-being of their community.
Okay, so back to the peace offering.
Yeah.
We know that certain parts were specifically for the priests.
Right.
What can you tell us about that?
So Leviticus 7.2833 described how the peace offering was divided.
Okay.
The breast, after being waved before God, was given to the priest to share.
Okay.
The right thigh went to the specific priest who had offered the blood.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Even within the priesthood, there were these specific designations. Why was that? Did it have to do with rank or seniority?
Well, Leviticus 7.3438 explains that these portions were part of the priest's consecration and represented God's faithfulness to those who served him.
So it was like a reciprocal relationship.
Exactly.
They served God, and in turn, God provided for them through these offerings.
Yeah, it's amazing how these ancient practices give us this window into their beliefs, their social structures, and their understanding of the divine.
It really is.
And all of this was communicated to Moses on Mount Sinai.
It makes you realize how these seemingly ancient and distant rituals are actually deeply connected to the human experience.
That's a great point. And even though we may not practice animal sacrifice today, there's something universal about that idea of offering like the best of ourselves.
Absolutely.
To something greater.
Yeah.
We've been on this journey through Leviticus chapter 7,
yeah.
exploring the ins and outs of those ancient Israelite offerings. And that idea of ritual purity.
Right.
What stands out to you as like the most significant
takeaway from all this?
I think for me, it's realizing that these ancient practices, even though they seem so removed from our lives today, they touch on these like universal themes that still resonate with us today.
It's like those rituals were their way of expressing something like fundamental about the human experience.
Yeah, think about it. The idea of making amends, seeking forgiveness, restoring those broken relationships. That's something we all deal with, even if we don't have these elaborate rituals for it.
And that concept of offering the best of ourselves, it really makes you think about what our modern day offerings might be.
Right. Maybe it's dedicating our time and talents to a cause.
Yeah.
Or just trying to be more compassionate and understanding with each other.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
It highlights that enduring power of ritual and tradition. So to recap, we've uncovered all those procedures for the offerings in Leviticus chapter 7, and we've explored their significance in ancient Israelite worship, and we've seen how those rituals addressed not just like spiritual atonement, but also social harmony and how to support the priesthood.
Yeah, and we've seen how those practices offer a lens to examine our own values and how we connect with something bigger than ourselves.
It's been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has.
I'm left with this sense of awe at the depth and complexity of these practices.
I agree.
And how they connect to the broader...
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even these distant rituals and beliefs can offer valuable insights into our own lives and values.
And on that note, we'd love to hear your thoughts and any questions you might have about Leviticus chapter 7.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep diving deep into whatever sparks your curiosity.
Yeah, thanks for listening.